Right then, another unwanted video on the Porsche pain in the arse Panamera. So this video technically has been started before we've even ended the last video where we had loads of problems with coolant issues, the EGR cooler, the radiator were expanded, the water pump and everything were leaking. If you've not seen that video already, that will go out before this one, so make sure you watch it. But as I said, at the end of that video, we were supposed to be getting this on the dyno to see if the downpipe and everything had made any difference to power. Before we even got it on the dyno, or in fact, did we pull it onto the dyno and then we found that it were only two-wheel drive instead of four-wheel drive, which is not ideal. So, back off the dyno to diagnose why it was only two-wheel drive. Initially, we thought it might have been a front differential problem. But now we're thinking the splines on that shaft might have gone, because if you push, we can push it in a little bit, can't we? Just to get a wiggle, and then it turns. So it seems very likely that that is the problem, but we'll soon find out. Weirdly, we had a very, very similar problem on a transporter last week. So on the transporters, this is quite common, but basically they've got this little stub shaft which goes into the drive shaft. And as you can see on that, the splines have failed, which means it just spins inside. It's stuck. So you get an horrible noise, just like we get on the Panamera, and you don't get any drive. So fingers crossed, in the next 16-ish hours, we'll have a fix. So just a quick update. As you can see, quite a bit of the Panamera's in bits now. Paul's decided to opt for the more difficult route, which was dropping the subframe and the engine, because we thought that obviously there's a male and a female part of the spline, and we thought, well, if one side's damaged, then there's potentially a good chance that the other side is damaged as well. So like with the transporter spline, the male side has rounded off the splines, but also the female side inside the shaft is also damaged. So this is a brand new shaft from Porsche. That's what you can basically see on the car, that's spinning without spinning, well, should I say, the diff is spinning without spinning this shaft. And then if I turn this round, that shaft fits onto there. But like I said, we're thinking that potentially it's not just the shaft that's going to need changing. The splines on the output shaft on the diff may also be damaged. So Paul's preparing for the worst, and that's why he's doing it the long way around rather than just doing the gearbox to find that we'd still need to drop the engine anyway to fit the diff. So maybe it's the right way of doing it. Being overly cautious might save us some time in the long run, but if it is just the shaft and it's not the diff, then obviously it took us a little bit more time, but we're on for a winner because, well, it doesn't need a diff. So still many more hours to go on this before we can actually access the shaft and the differential, but we'll check back in soon. So just in case you were wondering as well, all this on here is what you've got to take off just to remove the drive shaft. So the drive shafts alone on the Panamera, book time, 8 hours. So this car is the gift that keeps on giving. We've now managed to get the shaft off the differential. It's not looking good. The teeth, well, they're missing. I've tried getting some close-ups of the shaft and the spline on the differential because it's quite hard to focus on it, but hopefully you can see that pretty much everything in that has gone. And then on the diff, the splines, you can actually see where they've actually like twisted and rounded off. So we're not 100% sure if the ratio of the new differential we've got is correct. So we're going to open that up. If it is right, I think Paul's just going to chuck that in complete. If it's not, then we're going to have to swap the shaft from the new one into the old one and then fit that. And then we've got more problems, haven't we, Paul? So at some point, this has been worked on before, and at some point somebody's sent in that bolt on a bit of an angle and it's cracked the side of the engine mount, which means we're not going to leave it. We're going to have to replace that engine mount, but to get that engine mount off, it means taking off the aircon pump, which should be fun as well. So finally a bit of good luck with the Panamera, and I say luck, but I feel like we've kind of created this ourselves by fixing the problems. So finally, Ryan's been driving this, we've got no coolant problems, we've got no oil problems at the minute, the front diff's fixed, it's driving pretty much how it should be from the factory, or as to the best of us knowledge, it is driving as it should be anyway. So as you can see, we're back on the dyno. The previous figures when it was on here last, so 433, 434, 440, that's in standard form, and then anything from 523 to 527 tuned. So straight away, nice big improvement on these. For a 4-door, 4-seat, big luxury saloon coupe. Anyway, it's pretty quick for what it is and the size of it. That doesn't mean we don't want a little bit more. So if you watch the previous videos, we fitted the downpipe and the EGR stuff to try and diagnose the EGR coolant problem. Before we revert that back to the factory stuff, we still want to see if the downpipe has made any difference to power at all. We found a few restrictions as well, some of the joiners on the turbos, so we fabricated a new insert for that. So yeah, interesting. Now, it's all back to how it should be. In theory, we've got rid of a few restrictions. Can we get a bit more power out of it? Stick with us, we'll find out. So, the tuners have just finished with the Panamera on the dyno, and to make things a little bit more confusing, I should have probably jogged my memory from the last time, or the last video we put out of this Panamera, because the figures we had just shown before running it up were actually different to the figures that we put out on the last video, so bear with me on this one. So the last video went out, we claimed that it did 540.8 horsepower. The video went out. The next day, the car came back on the dyno. It actually did 527 horsepower. So exactly the same file. We made no changes to software, no changes to the hardware. We're thinking that it could just be a strapping inconsistency. Obviously, the temperature can make a massive difference, the ambient temperature outside, because the dyno's trying to correct that. But since that video went out, we actually ran it a couple of times and all the figures seemed a lot closer to 527 horsepower, seemed quite consistent at that, which is probably more accurate as to where it was. I think the 540 was pretty much an anomaly, I managed to say it. When we put it on with the DPF delete, it did very similar power to that again, pretty much bang on, 527 I think it did. And then with a few small changes, because obviously now we've got the downpipe on, different to EGTs, back pressure and stuff like that, it does mean we can change the file slightly to suit that, which has given us a bit of an increase low down, nice big spike of torque, which is the blue graph, obviously, all the way till about 4200, and then same with the power really, you get a bit of an increase low down, and then towards the top end it gets very similar to what it was doing before. So not a massive difference with the DPF downpipe on there. It's kind of to be expected. The downpipe itself, or the DPF filter itself, wasn't particularly blocked. We weren't getting high soot levels, so we knew that the standard downpipe was flowing pretty well, which is generally when you don't see much of a difference between with a DPF or without a DPF. It's only really when the DPF's blocked and it's sapping quite a bit of power out of the vehicle that you'll see a decent power increase by removing that. Obviously, different diameters can come into play. If you increase the diameter by quite a bit, say the standard downpipe's 2.5 inch, you put a 3.5 inch in there, you'll see a bit of an increase from the extra flow. But yeah, finally, back on the road. We can get this into the workshop now to get the downpipe off and get the standard DPF on there. Pretty good to know that when we do put it back on there, it's not going to make a massive difference to power. And now, fingers crossed, we can kind of get back on track with what we had intended for this car, and that's to put it head to head with some supercars. So if you want to see that in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm pretty sure we're going to be trying to get this on maybe a few other YouTube channels that are known for doing drag races and stuff. Who knows, if you're watching this, those channels, get in contact. We've got Panamera we want to race. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully you like this. Click the like button, subscribe. See you in the next one.